Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and in today's video, I'm going to the Jungle Cup, and I am hunting for Vigoroth with a team that triple hard counters it. In the Jungle Cup, Vigoroth is basically far and away the best Mon, as it is play into just about everything. I tried to construct a team where Vigoroth has losing matchups no matter where it's aligned. On the lead, I have Heracross. As the safe switch, I have Clodsire, and as the closer, I have who ended up being the star of the show, Sand Attack Palisand. So without further ado, let's hop into the matches, and I'm going hunting for Vigoroth in the Jungle Cup. Hopping into the first match, and I'm met with a huge problem as I lead Heracross into Altaria. Technically, this entire team loses to Altaria, so this is a problem. I'm going to stay in with the Heracross, fire off the Rock Blast, opponent commits the shield, and save switch into the Clodsire. They're staying in here, they're farming up a ton of energy, and they're going to send in Vigoroth. Vigoroth does not have a winning matchup here versus the Clodsire, although, to be honest, I would have much rather they sent in their final Pokemon, so that way I could hit Vigoroth with its hardest counter in the game, which is Sand Attack Palisand. They're going to go for the Body Slam, I can overfarm perfectly and go for the Earthquake just before they make their next move. Earthquake picks up the KO, and down goes Vigoroth. In the back, my opponent has a Scrafty. I'm going to farm up and go for the Earthquake just before they're able to make it to the foul play. My guess is they're going to look to overfarm until right before I make my next move, so I farm 3 over and I switch into the Heracross to catch the foul play. Hopefully, I'm still healthy enough to make it to a Rock Blast versus the Altaria. I get to the move, but the Dragon Breath KOs. Back in comes the Clodsire, but I lose charge attack priority to the Altaria. And now, it's all up to Sand Attack Palisand. Palisand should be able to knock out with a Shadow Ball, but I have to be very mindful of energy. My opponent is 3 off of a move with the Scrafty, so I'm going to need to double shield here and make sure that I overfarm enough that I can Shadow Ball the Altaria and be within 6 turns of a Scorching Sands. My opponent is going to be firing off the Sky Attack. I will commit the shield, and I need a perfect overfarm here. Farming up with the Palisand, in comes the Scrafty. I throw the move just before they're able to make it to the foul play. Scorching Sands picks up the KO. In comes the Altaria, and Palisand putting the team on his back. The Shadow Ball knocks Altaria out of the sky, and we're able to take the win. Moving into the next match, hitting Heracross into Sableye. Not the greatest lead ever, but I kind of need to stay in here because Palisand would get absolutely destroyed by this thing. My opponent is just going to go for the foul play as Heracross is very glassy, and I'm running an incredibly bad IV one. I'm able to make it to the back-to-back Rock Blasts. The question is, do I get knocked out here by the Shadow Claw? I barely do not. Let's go Heracross. Heracross gets to land a Rock Blast and gets Sableye quite low. In comes the Clodsire. Clodsire will be met with energy from the Sableye as Sableye goes for the foul play. If I try and farm down, unfortunately, it looks like my opponent is just going to be able to get through charge attack after charge attack. So this is looking a bit uncomfortable. I'm going to farm up and then fire off the Stone Edge right before I get to 100 energy, as I just need to get rid of my opponent here. Let's see what they have in the back. They have a Skarmory. I'm going to go for the Stone Edge to get some damage, and then I'm going to trust in Palisand. In comes the Palisand, opponent switches into a Vigoroth. They are completely walled, as this is the hardest counter to Vigoroth in the entire format. Their fast attack, double resisted. Their body slam, double resisted. We get the debuff, and the opponent concedes the match. The tough leads will not quit as I lead Heracross into another Altaria. Again, Altaria is a pretty uncomfortable Pokemon for this team to deal with. I'm going to farm up and fire off the Rock Blast. Rock Blast into the Altaria is going to be no shielded. I'm going to throw one more counter and send in the Clodsire. Clodsire will be met with energy from the Altaria, and that's very okay by me, as Clodsire is extremely bulky, able to withstand that damage. I'm going to farm up. My opponent is going to send in Vigoroth. Again, Vigoroth has nowhere to run on this team, which is good, but the bad news is I would really love it if that Vigoroth got stuck against the Palisand. Opponent is going to try and force the CMP type, but I'm not going to throw there. I'm going to try and get as much overfarm as I possibly can, and then I can go for the Stone Edge. This Stone Edge will be able to knock out. The Stone Edge does get shielded, and that's good news for me. My opponent is going to throw their energy. Very, very okay. And now I can send in the Palisand and get to work. These sand attacks shredding through this Vigoroth. Vigoroth will need to fire off Rock Slides here as it will be single resisted. In comes the Altaria. I could have thrown the Shadow Ball there and one charge attack priority, but unfortunately I do not. I'm going to look to overfarm a little bit as these Dragon Breaths are adding up, and I will be firing off the Shadow Ball. Down goes Altaria in the back. It's a Whimsicott. Oh, this is really bad. This is really, really bad. I'm going to go for the Shadow Ball. Whimsicott shields. I think I need a catch here, so I'm going to farm up, and I get the catch onto the Heracross. Okay, we get the catch. That's big. The Grass Knot does so much damage. I get farmed down, and it all comes down to this. If a Shadow Ball can KO, I can win this game. Come on, Palossand. Shadow Ball does not KO. My opponent will be able to get the double up on Grass Knots, and I resign the match. The leads will not quit. Heracross into Talonflame. I throw one counter, save switch into Clodsire. My opponent sends in a Ferrothorn, which is a very big surprise, as this is not a great matchup for the Ferrothorn. They go for the Power Whip. Here I make a pretty big mistake. I go for 4 in the move, and I end up going over 100 energy. It's a thing that, since I'm not too familiar with playing Clodsire, is a bit of an easy thing to do, going over 100, but it just hurts watching back. Like, that's an extremely inefficient play when I could have just done 1 in the move and not gone over 100. Power Whip, not going to KO here, so I will be able to withstand this damage. My opponent is going to have to throw their energy again, and this just sets up farm for the Heracross. And farm means that I can make a Rock Blast versus the Talonflame. So I send in the Heracross, get the farm down, they can bring in the Talonflame, I can throw 2 counters and the Rock Blast. So this Rock Blast is thrown right as their Incinerate ends. The Rock Blast nearly picks up the 1-hit KO. The 3rd counter just does not KO, and I'm just going to trust in Palossand. Palossand, it's an Altaria in the back, and that's not what I was hoping to see. It's an ABA flying team. I go for the Shadow Ball. Shadow Ball does get shielded. I'm going to need Palossand to put the team on his back once again and make it to a 3rd Shadow Ball. Shadow Ball number 2 gets the Altaria low. I need to get there. Come on, Palossand. Palossand, with a fraction of HP, makes the Shadow Ball, and this ensures the win because Talonflame, I can just sand attack down. We take the win and a 2 shield flex as well. Our target has been acquired in the next game, Heracross into Vigoroth. Opponent save switches into a Skarmory. I'm going to stay in with the Heracross and fire off the close combat just before they make their Sky Attack. Close combat does get shielded. I can now send in the Clodsire, and my goal here is, if my opponent wants to make a play for switch, I will let them, because I don't need switch advantage when I have 3 counters to Vigoroth. Instead, I would much rather keep my shield advantage, and if they choose to realign it so that way they don't have the Vigoroth on the Heracross, well, they're going to be stuck in an even more hard counter situation. They're going to go for the Brave Bird. They're going to switch into the Vigoroth, saving the Skarmory for later as I fire off the Earthquake. The Earthquake is going to connect. Switch clock not yet up. They get some energy on Vigoroth, but bad news, that energy goes nowhere into Palossand. In comes the Palossand. They're going to go for the Rock Slide, and Palossand just does not care. Vigoroth in absolute shambles here. My goal is, I don't think I can quite get the farm down before they can make their next move, so I want to bank a ton of energy, switch into the Heracross, and then snipe. We don't know what they have in the back. It's another Altaria. Altaria been absolutely everywhere so far in my early Jungle Cup battles. I go for the Rock Blast. That is going to connect, and oh, they make a nice catch. They catch the Rock Blast onto Skarmory, but realistically, that does not win them the game. I have way too much energy on Palossand and 2 shields to hide behind, so I can bring in the Palossand, go for the Shadow Ball. Opponent tries to call the bait, and that's another 2 shield flex. Moving to the next match, leading Heracross, what do you know? Another Altaria. Altaria is a Pokemon that this team is triple weak to, but the team, with careful play, I was able to win against some of them, which was nice. So I can land the Rock Blast, save switch into the Clodsire, and let's see if they're willing to throw energy. My opponent is going to send in their own Clodsire. They tried to catch a Stone Edge. They're unable to do so, and that is not going to be a fun time for the opponent. I'm looking to make it to another Earthquake, but I do lose charge attack priority, as unfortunately I do have an extremely high rank Clodsire, which is good in a lot of situations as I can survive more moves, but in the mirror it means I'm going to be losing charge attack priority. I try for the undercharge, but I do not get it right. Back in comes the Altaria. Altaria has a truly massive energy advantage, but they're going to need to throw 2 Sky Attacks if they want to get rid of me. And that's what they're going to do. They're throwing back to back here. This second Sky Attack is going to connect. Clodsire will be able to make it to the Stone Edge, and if they shield, I'm probably going to need to pivot, as I don't really want to give them any more farm. I pivot. In comes the Palisand. Palisand, farming. My opponent is going to make the Sky Attack, and I'm going to commit the shield. This is not a range where Scorching Sands will knock out. Altaria is way too bulky. I'm just going to continue to farm and go for the Shadow Ball. Shadow Ball into this Altaria will easily pick up the KO. They commit the shield. Can I make it to the next one? And I just can. I make the Shadow Ball, denying Altaria's Sky Attack. The Shadow Ball picks up the KO, and there's our good friend Vigoroth in the back. Hello, Vigoroth. And now Vigoroth is in an absolutely terrible spot to be in. Aggressive switch into the Heracross to force them to throw energy. Body Slam will do quite a lot here. Again, I have a terrible rank Heracross. It is the lucky Heracross. But now I can Sand Attack down with the Palisand. We keep seeing Altarias, but we keep getting wins. If I thought Altaria was bad, now I'm leading Heracross into a Mantine, the save switch into the Clodsire, and my opponent responds with a Shadow Steelix. This is very fine. I can force either shield advantage or switch advantage here. Even though Psychic Fangs does hit for super effective damage, Earthquake is going to do a lot if it lands, and it does. Now I should be able to commit to a Mudshot farm down. My opponent is going to be able to hang on and make one final Psychic Fangs. That is going to be getting me pretty low. Clodsire is going to get the farm down, leaving with quite a lot of energy. Switch Clock not yet up. They send in Vigoroth. I full send the Earthquake thinking that I can't make two Stone Edges, but in hindsight, maybe I should have gone for the Stone Edge because I can always switch out and then maybe make a Stone Edge later on. I aggressively pivot into the Palisand because I am very, very weak to Mantine. I'm basically triple weak to it, so I'm going to pivot into the Palisand at the very least to have an energy advantage. They have a ton of energy on the Mantine. I mean, I think I have to try and call a bait, and I do get that right. My opponent does bait with the Aerial Ace, which is good for me. I'm going to shield and then look to farm with the Palisand. I would love to go for the Shadow Ball just before my opponent makes a move. I'm farming up, and I miscounted. They had one residual. They're able to make the Aerial Ace, and now I've lost both shields. This is a little bit of an issue. I'm going to be firing off the Shadow Ball. Shadow Ball is going to be shielded, continuing to farm with the Palisand. Opponent sends in Vigoroth, and I switch into the Heracross as my opponent is going to fire off a charge attack. It is going to be the Body Slam. Heracross needing to make it to the Rock Blast, but I get outpaced. The Vigoroth had so much residual energy. The Body Slam KOs because I have a terrible IV Heracross. I send in the Clodsire. I just cannot make the move, and I can't get enough energy to beat the Mantine and that Vigoroth, so I resign the match. Looking for redemption, we see an amazing lead leading Heracross into Vigoroth, but the opponent save switches into a Whiscash, and I don't have a good response. My backline gets crushed by Whiscash. Whiscash will go for the Scald. I'm going to overfarm and go for the close combat on the CMP to the next Scald, but I'm low enough that they can just go for the Mud Bomb. What am I doing? Oh my goodness. The good news is I can force either both shields back or just get the KO with the close combat. Close combat, gets no shielded, down goes Whiscash. They send in Vigoroth. I decide to save that energy for later and pivot into the Clodsire. In hindsight, maybe I could have been better off just close combating, letting myself get KO'd, and, well, presuming they shield the close combat, and then I could have just brought in the Palisand, but I wanted to save that energy, because I don't know what their final Pokemon is, and I want to give myself options, because it's close combat, but if they have a Flyer, it could also be a Rock Blast. They're going to be firing off Body Slam after Body Slam into the Clodsire. I can go for the Stone Edge. The Stone Edge should be enough to knock them out, and the Stone Edge does get shielded. That is very okay by me. They're going to overfarm and go for the Body Slam on charge attack priority. Overfarming as much as they possibly can, and the Body Slam will KO. But I got the shield back, so I can send in Palisand in the back. It's a Shadow Steelix. They will resign the match, as they do not have a win con. Hopping into the next match, we get same leads. Vigoroth into Heracross. They save switch into Lanturn and Trainer. I am so sorry. Welcome to Hard Counter City. As Clodsire does extremely well into Spark Lanturn, because Lanturn can't really ever spark into a range where two Surfs will KO. So this is a very comfortable matchup for the Clodsire. I can land the Earthquake, tank the Surf, Mud Shot down, and exit with energy that I can use to threaten whatever my opponent decides to send in. Clodsire gets the farm down, exiting with energy. In comes the Vigoroth, and I decide to full send. I'm going for the Earthquake here. This will do a lot of damage if it lands, and it does. I should be able to make it to a Stone Edge as well, and this, I believe, will be enough to knock out. The Stone Edge gets shielded. My opponent They're banking on energy here, but the energy is useless against the Palisand. So instead of putting in the Heracross, we put in the Palisand. Body Slam is double resisted. They do not want to play the game anymore, and they resign the match. Hopping into the final match, we have one more terrible lead for the road, leading Heracross into Toxicroak, and my charge attacks are completely walled here. I'm going to be staying in this matchup. My opponent, unfortunately, does successfully bait me with a Mud Bomb, as I will fire off the Close Combat. Close Combat is going to be shielded. I continue to farm up with the Heracross. They're going for another Mud Bomb. This is resisted, but I'm debuffed, so it's probably going to knock out, and it does. That's definitely not ideal. And I'm going to really need there to be a Vigoroth in the back, because this Toxicroak is completely destroying me. They can go for the Mud Bomb, but Clodsire is able to tank this, so I'm not too worried about that. And now my opponent is actually going to pivot. So they switch out of that matchup, and I can fire off the Stone Edge into the Mantine. Mantine would completely destroy my Palisand in the back, so I am incredibly happy to see the Mantine here. Mantine has energy, they go for the Ice Beam, but the high rank Clodsire, it may lose CMP in the mirror, but it's barely able to hang on and pick up the knockout. In the back, they have a Lanturn, and I have a Sand Attack Palisand. So it's not the Vigoroth, but this is probably the second best thing they could have had back there, because Surf does a lot, but Palisand should be in a very good spot. They try and catch onto the Toxicroak, but I hold on to the energy and get the full farm down. Back in comes the Lanturn. They need to double up on Surfs to win. They cannot spark down. The Scorching Sands get shielded, but there's more where that came from, trainer. Scorching Sands number 2 is going to connect. Massive damage onto the Lanturn. Palisand gets the farm down, and we take the win. All in all, I had a ton of fun getting to run this team. Although, to be honest, while running it, I discovered this team has a tremendous amount of flaws. The team overall is very weak to Whiscash. It is extremely weak to Mantine. And if you're going up against Altaria, you're going to have an extremely rough day. So while I had a lot of fun getting to try and triple hard counter Vigoroth, I do think that running a more balanced team that has more coverage would probably bring better results overall. But hey, I did have a lot of fun with the team. I did end up going 8-5 with it overall, so I went positive with it, but I don't think I'd recommend this particular team. I mean, maybe you could run instead of the Heracross like a Vigoroth in the lead and have better results, but all in all, I just had a lot of fun getting to make Vigoroths have a very bad day. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you're enjoying the content, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And a special thank you as always to our members here on YouTube. The support guys provide is sincerely appreciated. So thank you guys oh so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.